So, Oldham have been promoted from the National League. Doesn't mean I'm not going to care about it. So, here are my predictions for the 25-26 Enterprise National League. Is my air freshener? I don't know if you heard that, but let's get to the predictions. 24th, Morecambe. I'm not going to go too much into detail about this one, so new video tomorrow. 23rd, Truro. Now, personally, with Truro, I don't really have high hopes for them. I think they're going straight back down. I don't think they're really that good enough for the National League. Of course, first ever team from Cornwall to go into step one of the National League system, and fair play to them. They've done really well, but I just don't really see them lasting. But it is a very hard league to predict. Of course, nobody saw Oldham, me included, getting promoted. Of course, back in September, we were the best team in the league, but then we just dropped off. But who knows what's going to happen with Truro? I don't really see them surviving. There's just too much quality in and plus I don't know what's going to happen with relegation, but with the whole Morecambe situation. But then again, I don't think it would affect 23rd, but they'll have a crack, I think. 22nd, Brackley. What I said about Truro can also be said about Brackley Town. Again, there's just far too much competitiveness in the league, and I don't think Brackley could withstand that, and it's just too much quality in the league. You now got Carlisle in the league. You've got York, who I think we'll get to them later. Southend after they lost, and we'll just see the rest of the list, of course. But again, Brackley straight back down. It just doesn't really look good for the newly promoted sides, to be honest. 21st, Braintree. And lastly, to be relegated, it is unfortunately Braintree. I do like Braintree as a club. I think they're a proper club, but I just don't see them surviving this season. Again, I feel like it'll be similar to Fylde. Of course, they did pull off some surprise results last season, like they beat Gateshead. Is it 3-1 at the Gateshead International Stadium? And that's the day that we were nearly secure playoffs, but yeah. Anyway, about Braintree, I don't really see them surviving. What Fylde did last season, they finished mid-table. I think it was mid-table, something like that, but now they've been relegated. And I think the same will happen to Braintree. Transfers-wise, I've not really been keeping up. I do know a few transfers in and around, this league, but I've only really been focusing on Oldham's and a few around us, really. But yeah, unfortunately, Braintree, you're going down, in my opinion. 20th, Wealdstone. And just surviving relegation, Wealdstone. I think they'll have a bit of a drop off this season. Well, they'll finish similar position, I believe, because Alex Reid's left. I just don't see them doing that well. Alex Reid, of course, he bagged 20 goals for Wealdstone, and he did really well. He was really in form, and I think it was a mistake letting him go. Of course, he just really fell out of favour with Mickey Mellon. And yeah, but anyway, about Wealdstone, seeing as they've lost Alex Reid, it's just a massive blow, and I don't see them doing well because of that factor. But they'll stay up, and they'll just continue being a National League club, because I think they're one of the bigger clubs in this league and the most set in stone clubs in this league, a select few. 19th, Boston. So now Boston, of course, it's their first season going pro. Of course, used to be an EFL club back in the mid to late 2010s, but They, of course, they went down to the National League North, I believe it was. And, of course, last season, so they were in a massive relegation scrap and they survived. And, to be fair, I like Boston, sorry. I don't know why I said Wellstone then, but yeah, I like Boston, of course. Beat Rochdale 3-2, was it? And, yeah, they're a solid club, I think, and they'll survive comfortably. And similar with the next club, which is 18th Boreham Wood. So Boreham Wood, I think, similar to Wealdstone, they are a set-in-stone National League side. They're too big for the National League South, and again, similar to Boston, I think they'll survive comfortably. I don't know really much about any standout players, but all I know is that Timmy Abraham's brother, did play there on loan, I believe, after he played for us. And, of course, did reach the playoff final, only lost out to, last minute to a James Norwood winner against Tranmere at Wembley back in 2018, I'm pretty sure. But, again, I think they're a solid National League side, and I think they'll stay up comfortably. 17th, Gateshead. Now, first controversial opinion of the video, I think Gateshead will have a massive fall-off from last season. Of course, they've let a lot of players go. Of course, they've let Luke Cannon go to us. He's obviously their best player last season. I believe, was it Regan Booty or someone like that just left, and of course they've just lost a lot of their quality players, and their just transfer history will really have a massive blow on them, I think, and they'll survive, of course, but they'll have a massive drop off, and their transfer window just shows that. 16th, Scunthorpe. Now, for Scunthorpe, I do personally believe Scunthorpe will survive. They are too big for that league, and of course, at one point they were a championship club, and they've had a massive drop-off since with ownership issues, but I do think they will survive this year, but they'll only finish around 16th, but they're a solid club, and they're too big for this league. That's all I'm just going to say. And to be honest, this is probably the last footage I've got, because I did forget to film Scunthorpe, so 15th, Halifax. So, controversial opinion number 2. Halifax will be in a similar position to Gateshead, of course. A lot of the squad is injury prone, though they have signed Sean Hobson, who is a solid centre-back. Of course, did really well for us. He was decent for us. I liked him, and I can't believe we let him go to Halifax. But of course, Halifax, they've got a bit of an aging squad and very injury prone, and I think that's what really affected them last season. Season just gone, and of course lost 4-0 to us in the playoffs. And I think, to be honest, they were quite lucky to get playoffs. Of course, beat them 2-0 at Boundary Park, and we needed that though. But they had a lot of vital losses last season, and we nearly didn't even play Halifax. Of course, we could have played Southend or Rochdale, but I'm glad we did, and of course it led to us going up. 14th, Solihull Moors. Solihull Moors, of course, a few years ago, they were really big playoff contenders. Of course, reached the final. They've reached it twice, losing to Bromley and Hartlepool, I believe they lost to. But yeah, Solihull Moors, they have had a massive drop-off. I think it's owner issues, of course. They've lost Jack Stevens to us, and he was a really vital player for them. Of course, scored a overhead kick against us in the last minute a few years ago, but again, I don't think they'll do well this season. They've just had a massive fall off last season. Of course, they were in and around the playoffs at the start, but then had a massive drop off, and I believe they finished in bottom table, nearly got relegated. But again, I think they're another solid National League side who will, of course, retain their position for years to come.
13th, Yeovil.
Not really much to say about Yeovil, except they're a solid mid-table side, and I think, again, after coming up from the National League South now 2 years ago, or last year even, I think they will finish mid-table. I just don't think there really is anything special. Of course, they beat us 2-1, I believe it was. Jake Capri scored a worldie. But, again, I don't really see anything special. Maybe an FA trophy, but who knows.
12th, Eastleigh.
To be honest, I can see Eastleigh having another decent season. Of course, they've signed Josh Lundstrom, he was one of our more creative players last season. And, yeah, I do, they are cooking. They are cooking, and I see them actually being maybe even playoff contenders this season. And I do believe they will overachieve. They're probably going to be this season's overachievers, and they fully deserve that. I believe they're a solid club, and they're just... I'm getting messages. Yeah, they're just a solid club, really, and they will finish mid-table. But, again, they're a solid side. I think they'll try and make a playoff push, maybe earlier on in the season. But again, might just drop off slightly.
11th, Woking.
Now, again, there's not really a lot to say about Woking, but I will make one thing clear. They are, I believe, the biggest club never to play in the EFL. As far as I'm aware, I don't think they have played in the EFL, but of course, rivals Aldershot have, I believe, back in the 90s. But again, I think they will finish mid-table, or slightly up, lower upper table. And I think they'll have a pretty solid season for their standard. And of course, made the FA Trophy semi-final, only losing out to, of course, said rivals Aldershot in a thrilling semi-final, though I do believe people say they were robbed of something. I'm not 100% sure, but I can see Woking having a decent season.
10th, Aldershot.
And now I've gone and put Aldershot. They're Woking's local rivals. Again, of course, FA Trophy winners. They did finish 12th, I believe. But I think they will build on that, and I can see them finishing really high, higher than last year. And I do see them having a solid season and maybe even a later push of playoffs. Who knows? But again, they're probably going to finish lower upper table, and they'll have a solid season. Beat Oldham 4-1, and did the double over us. They beat us 3-1, I believe it was at Boundary Park. But yeah, I think they will have a decent season and a later push for the playoffs.
9th, Sutton.
Sutton, of course, recently relegated from League 2, and I believe they'll try and push, slowly, gradually build towards going back to the Football League, because when they're in League 2, I believe they were a solid club, and they were well run, and of course they then, got relegated. But again, I think they'll have a bit of a playoff push, and they'll be in and around the playoffs. And yeah, that's, again, not much to say about Sutton, really.
8th, Altrincham.
And just missing out on playoffs for the second year in a row, Altrincham. Altrincham, again, they've really shown their worth in the National League, and of course recently coming professional, and they've just slowly built towards Football League, and I think they will achieve Football League at one point in their history. They fully deserve it, and they're a solid club, I think, and they've got, of course, they've let Thingy go to York, which is a massive loss for them, but yeah, I can see them still doing well. And from what I've heard, Billy Waters is apparently linked with Altrincham. I'm not 100% sure how true that is, but I believe they will just miss out on playoffs for the second year in a row. But again, still a solid season for them.
7th, Tamworth.
So they beat Huddersfield in the FA Cup first round. They beat Burton in the second round. Barely just lost out to Spurs. I think Tamworth will have a great season. And they deserve it. They really did well last season, and I think they'll do even better this season. Of course, they did really well in the Cup, and of course, I know we beat them 4-0, but at the end of the season, they really pushed the playoffs, and they were really unlucky not to get playoffs, of course. Lost out to Southend and Gateshead, but again, I think with Gateshead finishing lower, in my opinion, and Halifax as well, I think Tamworth will fill in the gaps there and just secure playoffs.
6th, Forest Green.
Controversial opinion number 3, Forest Green will finish 6th. Yeah, I know they did finish, they were one of the best teams in the league last year, but I think they'll have a massive fall off. And I've heard transfer rumours about Nick Horton going there, but I've heard something else very recently. But yeah, I do think Forest Green will have a massive fall off. They nearly got to the playoff final, but only lost on penalties to Southend, and I think that will give them a bit of a downer. But again, they will finish in the playoffs. They're too big for this league, I think. But I think they're definitely like lower league, League 2, upper National League sides club. But I don't really see them doing well this season. I do see them doing well, but not as good as last season, to be honest. But yeah, that's about it for the Forest Green.
5th, Rochdale.
To be fair, I know, yeah, they're going to do well in the playoffs, I think. But yeah, I'm an Oldham fan, and I'm saying Rochdale are going to do well. But they have made some good signings. They've, of course, made Pritchard from us. And I know they've had a whole load of other decent signings. I've got a friend who lives not too far from me who's a Rochdale fan, and I do believe Rochdale will do well this season. Of course, last season they bottled the playoffs quite badly against Southend at home, but I think they will at least make the semis this year and push on towards getting back to the Football League. But rivalry aside, I think they will have a far better season than last season.
4th, Hartlepool.
So, of course, the biggest... I think they'll have the biggest improvement from last season. I think, of course, they've signed Alex Reid, and I think they have made a few other decent signings, but, of course, yeah, they've got Sharon as well from Oldham, and I think he'll really link up well with Alex Reid, and I think they will have a really good season, Hartlepool, and they're too big of a club for that league again. Like, there are a lot of clubs in this league now that are just too big for that league. They're too big for the league, and they need to get out. But again, Hartlepool, they're a solid club, and I think they will flourish this season.
3rd, Southend.
So, of course, playoff finalists last year. I do really like Southend, and they're a solid club. Of course, they've got Gus Scott Morris, and they've got a really good squad, and with them making signings, of course, they'll improve their squad further, and they'll push on to get promoted. And I will say at the end who will get promoted and in the playoffs, and who will come up from the National League North and South as well. So yeah, there's that, and I do believe Southend, they will push on, and I think Wembley as well. It's given a massive boost in finance, of course. They took about, 28,000 to Wembley, which is absolutely incredible. And plus, us and Southend broke the National League record for a playoff final, which is absolutely incredible.
2nd, Carlisle.
So, of course, recently relegated Carlisle. I don't think they'll win the league. I think they'll realise how actually hard it is to get out of this league. Of course, we proved that first season in the National League. We finished, was it 11th? And of course, we were in a bit of a relegation scrap in December. Of course, remember we beat Yeovil and Torquay. And of course, it was just, we were really on and off that season, and we just pushed for an 11th place finish. And of course, we really struggled. And I think it will show that will show for Carlisle as well. Of course, I think they'll be this season's version of Forest Green, and they'll realise how hard it is to actually get out of the league. But all in all, they've got a really good squad, and they will push for the league title. But of course, there's only one club, I believe, that will win the league. Well, there's only one club that wins the league title anyway, but there's only one club that I think is capable of winning the league title, and that is
First York.
And of course, it had to be, I hate to say it, but the winners of the 25-26 Enterprise National League, I really don't like saying that, is York City. It'll be York City, and they've got a really good squad, and I think they will absolutely walk the league this season. They've got, of course, Ollie Pearce. They've got a really good... Their attack is just incredible for that division. Ollie Pearce, Josh Stones. They've got... I've got his name, the one that used to play for Oldham. But yeah, they've got a really good squad, and of course, they've got a really good defence. Harrison Mail in goal. And they will just walk the league, as they, of course, missed out. They lost 3-0 to us, and I believe, of course, they've done the business as well, and they've got the fan backing as well, which is, they've got a really good fan backing. Of course, they had 7,000, was it, against us in the league? But they've got, they will just walk it this season, and they deserve it after they just lost out last season. But again, yeah. And my prediction for the playoffs now. That's it for the league. Now for the playoffs. I believe that this year's playoff winners will be Hartlepool United. I believe they've got that good of a squad, and I believe they can do it, and I believe they will beat Southend in the final. Sorry, Southend fans, but I do believe Southend will be champions 26-27. But again, that's said. Coming up from the National League North and South, I believe it'll be Curtin Ashton and Chester from the north, and from the south, it'll be Torquay and Maidstone. And of course, with that said, there will be more videos on the way, definitely. But with that said, do subscribe, do like this video, and do tell me your predictions for the Enterprise National League. And with that said, take care.